Let me first of all introduce myself because I consider myself a kind of trespasser because I'm not a linguist. I belong to the Department of English and Linguistics. I mean to say, I'm not a scholar of linguistics. So it is a rather courageous attempt to talk among the linguists about linguistics. So I hope you excuse me for my courage. At the same time, I rather look forward for the insights from you people because this is a kind of preliminary study. I'm talking about the language which is not well researched as such. So it is the language which is a kind of variety rather. I would like to talk about that later. So in the beginning, I would like to just talk something about modification. I'm going to talk about noun modifying expressions in Vadar. So syntactically, modification is a construction in which one grammatical element referred to as the modified, generally a noun, an adjective, etc., is modified by another, that is another modifier, such as determiners, quantifiers, etc. So we are well familiar with the term modifier, by which we mean a word, phrase, or clause that restricts or adds to the sense of a head noun. And here I'm referring to Professor Subbarao work, South Asian languages, typology of South Asian languages, in which he refers to 4 noun modification strategies which are found in South Asian languages. Relative clauses, the WH relative clause type, which are fully sentential. Second type is the participle or nominalization type with an infutable form of the immediate verb depending on the language family. The third type he refers to is the agentative nominal type construction, which corresponds to the ER type nominals of English. And the fourth strategy that he refers to is the modification of a noun by an adjective. So in this paper, I attempt to study the noun modifying expressions in the Vadar variety. So I refer to, as I mentioned earlier, the Professor Subbarao here for this particular study. Let me talk something about this particular variety. I'm not calling it language deliberately because whether Vadari is an independent language or heterogeneous variety of the Telugu language has actually, that is a matter of serious investigation. But in Ethnologue described as a South Central language which is closely related to the Telugu language. Therefore, I prefer to call it a variety. But the instances of the conversational situation, as I myself be the speaker of that language and I am unable to understand Telugu language clearly, and even when I talk in my language, the Telugu speakers also fail to understand me. Therefore, I think that there is a kind of lack of mutual intelligibility between the speakers of these particular languages. Of course, I agree that I can make out some words when the speakers of Telugu speak, but there is no complete mutual intelligibility as such. Perhaps it is on account of the ongoing divergence process, the W speakers, particularly from Maharashtra. So they are not in position to understand the Telugu speakers, and as I mentioned earlier, we are not able to understand Telugu, and the Telugu speakers also don't understand us. And this language, this variety rather, has come in contact with Marathi for a long time now, and it will be interesting to see if it is consistent in its non-modified expressions with other Dravidian languages, or has it diverged? That is the question. So let's come to these particular strategies that Professor Subbarao has referred to. The first strategy is relative clauses, the WH relative clause type, which are fully sentential. So here I have come across some examples from the Vadar variety. The first that I'm referring to is subject relative clause. Erva Angi Eskunur Manasi. So you can understand the person who has worn a shirt. Eskunur is the past participle form, and Manasi stands for a person. It is the example of the subject relative clause. And another example is non-subject relative clause. A sottam etka vachin batta. So here you can see the demonstrative that is used. Means demonstrate that, and then the sottam stands for guest. The clothes that the guest brought. So these are the examples of the relative clauses. Then I just try to understand the participle or nominalization type with an infinitive form of the embedded verb. So the structure used here is verb infinitive plus gender or plural marker, or what we call number marker is also used. So the table shows the list of infinitive forms of the verbs which are followed by the gender and plural markers. Gender and number marker. So in the first column, I talked about the masculine forms. Fayyatu, one who is going, and the feminine form is fayyad, one who is going, female, it refers to female. So this particular marker, or fayyad and fayyad. So the retroflexive and the retroflexive and the makes the difference between the gender, and these are singular verbs, singular words, whereas the plural form of the same is fayatur. So it is marked by O, those who are going. Similar examples are given. One who is coming, it's vachatur. If it is a male, if it is a female, it is vachit. And vachatur is the plural form. Nagatur, susyatur, and dunketur are the forms which refer to the masculine gender, whereas naket, susyet, dunket are the words, susyatur, dunketur are the words. So here we see that the infinitive form is followed by the gender marker or plural marker to get the what we call to get the nominalization process here. Further, I refer to a third strategy, the assentive nominal type construction, wherein the structure noun plus gender and plural or number marker follows. So bundle is the noun and the gender marker od is used, as we saw in the earlier for structures as well. So bundler is the man who owns vehicles or carts, and bundlat is a lady or a woman who owns vehicles or carts, and the plural form of the same is bundlaur. Same in the case of etchinor. Etchinor is the person who is over smart, and etchind is the lady who is over smart, and the plural form is etchinor. So mogun illur refers to a person, a male person who belongs to the husband's family, whereas mogun illid refers to a lady who belongs to the husband's family, and mogun illur is the plural form of the same, which is neutral in its gender. Then the fourth strategy that Professor Subbarao refers to is the modification of a noun by an adjective. So here I have just mentioned two examples just for the sake of discussion. Singar Andit refers to a beautiful lady. So here you can see that the article is missing here. Simply we refer to beautiful lady. And Lot Magabeda refers to a tall boy. Apart from these strategies that I have tried to understand, of course, this is a preliminary data. As I mentioned earlier, so I got certain reservations regarding these observations, but I seek your insights in elaborating my understanding of these things. So I have taken 10 examples from both the languages. So Bida, and in Telugu as well, Bida is used to refer to child. Abida. So in these examples, what we see in this table, the modification of a noun is elaborated. So Bida or Billa by demonstrative R show the distance as an example number 2 that we saw. Then example number 3 by an adjective maga, an adjective used and then maga refers to male. Okay, both in both languages, Magabeda. Okay, and that bed child. Then Alok Magabeda. So the expansion of the phrase continues in example number 4 and 5, wherein a noun is preceded by adjectives and a demonstrative. And in example 6, it is modified by a demonstrative locative marker, monologue in the corner. So we can see monologue, loth, lav, inka, yara, magabeda. In Telugu, they have Mula, Teluga, Lavagu, Koduga, Unna, Pelludu.
So, Dr. Digambar, you have last 5 minutes.
Yes.
You have last 5 minutes, including the question answers.
Yes.
So please finish it within 2 minutes so that people can ask questions.
My last slide, yes, sir. So in example 7, 8, like Telugu language, one can see the use of participle or nominalization type in the WL variety as well. So that shows that W seems to be consistent in the NME with other Dravidian languages in these examples. But when it comes to example 9 and 10, W seems to have adopted the pattern of relative correlative clauses in Indo-Aryan languages, which is less common in Dravidian languages as per Professor Subbarao's observations. So I wonder if it could be interpreted as an instance of divergence in the WB. So what I observed through this particular preliminary study is that the W syntax and morphology are losing its affinity to the south central branch of Dravidian language. And the reason, one of the basic reasons behind this might be the geographic and social dispersion, and the W variety, that is Vada variety community, Vada community in Maharashtra, I'm sorry for that misspelling, has been away from its land of origin for several generations now, and it has lost its social roots with Telugu land. Therefore, this maybe it is losing its linguistic roots as well. That's what I observed, but it is too early to come to this conclusion. These are the references. Thank you so much.
Dr. Gutke?
Yes, sir.
I think you should call yourself a linguist, and
thank you so much.
You are following the correct methodology with the goal of the research well defined, and the conclusion is also on the right track. I think the research material, as you said, needs to be expanded. You need more
Yes.
corpus, and
Yes,
you
sir.
need to probably do, my suggestion only,
Yes, sir.
more comparative work, because
Yes, sir.
Subbarao's work has shown for many decades that
Yes, sir.
the modification in general, so relative clause also modification, is one of the first things which is affected through contact. So if you're familiar with his work on Dakhini Hindi or Dakhini Urdu,
Yes,
very
sir.
expansive work, and Dr. Agarwal also did PhD with him many years ago. That work is very accessible, typological. You don't need a very theoretical background. So I think it is good, and I think the conclusion is on the right track, that this correlative strategy is possibly due to contact with Marathi.
Marathi, yes, sir.
But there is one point which is a little bothersome, is that Marathi and other languages, for example, on the East, Indo-Aryan languages, East, for example, Assamese, to some extent Bangla also, they in fact show more instances of participial relatives
Okay.
than correlatives. They do have correlatives, active strategy of correlatives. So that is also something which one needs to take into account while working out this equation between what is influencing what.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So I
sir.
think that, and maybe the last suggestion is that perhaps looking at the morphological rules of Awadar in terms of what is the actually the participle marker with the verb,
Yes, sir.
and not just the person, noun, number, gender features. Those
Okay,
are
sir.
kind of sometimes easy to figure out, but the verbal inflectional features, that if you can try to separate out from other expressions in Awadar,
Okay,
then I
sir.
think this will be a richer.
Yes, sir. So rather I would like to used to suggest me a book for expanding, enhancing my knowledge regarding this particular.
Yes, you can write to me, then we can have
Yes,
a
sir. Sure,
conversation.
sir. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Shall I
I'll
ask
put
a
my
question, sir?
email on the chat box.
Yes, sir. I'll take it.
Yeah, I like to add a few things of mine.
Okay, sir.
Rajendran.
Fine, yes.
I worked on noun-modifying expressions in Tamil.
Yeah, I refer to your articles.
The group actually, Prashant and Pardeshi and some people from Chokha
Japan,
and all actually.
yeah.
They worked on noun-modifying expressions throughout the world actually, and one of the work actually is a noun-modifying expression in Marathi actually. Have you looked into that?
No, I haven't referred to
Please
it.
look into that. Actually, they have, of course, worked mainly on the what you call relative participle noun modifications. Actually.
Okay, sir.
Try to see. They had a kind of 19 types. Actually, they have identified. Then they try to actually make a kind of typological study throughout the world, and worked on that. Right?
Yeah.
So, interesting thing. Actually, please look into that.
Okay, thank you so much for
That's,
your
my,
suggestion.
that's all my suggestion.
Yes.
Simply noun-modified expressions in Marathi by Prashant Pardeshi.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Paper. Please look into that. That's all.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much.